Hello there! So far in the previous videos, I've shown you how I make a simple print, how I dodge and burn to improve a print, and how to deal with a split grade print. It's finally time to combine all of them. I've chosen this photo that I took in Amsterdam about 3 years ago. I saw this gentleman taking a break from construction work on the side of the street and asked for permission to take their picture. I'll be making a split grade print on some Ilford MG4 RC satin. Since I've already made 3 videos involving test strips, I've skipped that part in this video. If you want to learn about how I do my test strips, please check out my previous videos. And I also have some bad news. I'm almost running out of paper, so I'll be starting small with this one. I can almost use the compensate mode to adjust everything depending on the paper size later on. I'll be working with grade 00 and 5 filters. For the highlights, I've tested the large door here, and I got an exposure time of 2.9 seconds. For the shadows, I wanted to keep some of the detail on the inside of the building, and my test gave me a time of 6 seconds. I've set up 2 of my channels with the respective numbers, and I'm ready to do a test exposure. I'm trying to capture a very high dynamic range here. The split grade method should ensure that I have both my highlights and my shadows nicely detailed, but I'm already expecting to require a lot of local touches here and there. But first, I need to see how this one develops. Here's the print fixed and dried. Everything looks okay on the first impression, midtones just fell together nicely and I'm quite happy with the general feel of this photo. Of course there are some areas that I could improve on. Let me go through them one by one as I'm making the second print. First of all, while the shadows have been exposed very well overall, I'd like to see just a bit more detail in this area. I know the negative has that detail. I want to bring that out without affecting the overall image, which means I'll have to dodge that area while printing. So before I make the exposure, I'll set up a dodge action first. I'll call that area of darkness my subject B and choose an amount of half a step. Now when I click the expose button, it'll stop towards the end in order to remind me to dodge subject B. I have this small mask attached to my remote here that I've placed above that area. As I click the button on the remote, the enlarger turns on again and I carefully dodge the area where I want more detail to appear. Keep in mind that I'm doing it with a grade 5 filter which affects the shadows. I also want a more pronounced texture in these cobblestones as well as making the whole pavement area slightly darker. I'll be burning the area of the grade 00 filter as well, but normally it will just affect the highlights. In order to enhance the texture, I have to create more contrast there, which means I should burn with the grade 5 filter as well. I want these lines significantly more pronounced, so I'll set a burn amount of 1.2 steps. Once again you can see the burn time on the right changes as I set the amount. And my paper has been partially exposed, so all I need to do is apply the exposure on top of what I already have. I'll be using this piece of paper as a mask and expose the bottom edge while gradually moving the mask back and forth to avoid the sharp edge, which would have been distracting. Now for the highlights, I swapped the filters and my channel on the timer to do the whole exposure. I won't be dodging anything with this filter on, but there are 2 areas that I want to improve by burning some highlight detail in. One I've already mentioned is the bottom edge. I had used a time of 1.2 stops in the shadows. I'll go for 0.7 stops for the highlights. All I need is some more texture, especially on the pavement under their feet, and make the whole area a bit less bright in general so attention of the viewer doesn't shift there as much. That was step 1. And for my second and final step, I want a bit more highlight detail on this man's arm. Here's my subject A clearly, and 0.4 stops of extra highlight exposure should bring out some nice detail there. I'll be using a piece of paper with a hole in it as a mask, and since I'll be holding it with both my hands, I'll be using my hand trigger to start the exposure. Now let's see the result. Here it is. Side by side, the first thing I noticed is that I've made a mistake here. My calls on burning the bottom edge are justified, but this puddle here has received too much exposure and has become distracting. I'll add another dodge time here for the shadows. Apart from that, everything seems alright. There's some nice details in here and here finally. Time to clean the negative of all the dust and adjust the enlarger for the final exposure, which I'll be making on a much larger sheet of paper. In the compensate mode, before choosing the length option, I'll choose A and B channels. That way when I enter both my measurements, it'll compensate both channels for the same amount, along with all my dodge and burn times. Since I already have a 00 filter in there, I'll just start with that. After doing the main exposure, I'll be carefully burning both areas as before, just on a larger scale. Then I'll change the filter for the shadows, switch to the channel with my foot switch, do the main exposure and dodge the shadow area on top. This time I have a second area to dodge, which is the puddle to the bottom. and then finally burn the bottom edge. Time to develop and see if everything went alright. I'm happy to report that indeed everything went just fine. This is much less distracting now, while still keeping the character of the particular street on that particular day. Everything else is more or less a supersized copy of my previous attempt, which was the whole point. I might tone this one and frame it and display it on one of my walls, maybe cropping the crooked stair to the right, which is kinda distracting. I hope you've enjoyed all my videos so far. I'll be uploading one more video before starting a crowdfunding campaign for my darkroom timer. In that video, I'll be going over all the menus and settings, explaining everything in more detail. Thanks for all your time, and see you in another video.